working through our Jesus and Politics series. And again, not really relevant to our world right now, but we thought we'd talk about politics. So we don't have a federal one yet, do we? You haven't heard anything? I think I would have heard something, but probably we have a new prime minister, so talking about politics, this kind of whatever. We still have a country, so that's good. So, all right. So is this? Oh, come on. We were doing so good. After a terrible tech morning, we thought we had it all figured out. In the Old Testament, how's the Old Testament? Right, the people of Israel. If I say Mount Sinai, you know Mount Sinai, right? The people come out of slavery. God calls them out with Moses. He's trying to help them become a new people, a new group of people. And they go to Mount Sinai, and he gives them the 10 Commandments. This is to help them become, form their identity of who they are and all these things. And what are the first three of the 10 Commandments? What are the first three? What are the first three? No other gods before you. Yeah, don't take the Lord's name in vain. That's number 3. And what's number 2? No graven images, right? No graven images. How did Israel do with that? Let's see. Oh, yeah, it works. Right on.
I thought number 2 was obey your wife. That's just what she told you.
Yeah. How did Israel do? Israel did not do well with only the Lord your God, no graven images, right? No idols, and don't take and by take the Lord's name in vain, they didn't mean like you stub your toe and you take the Lord's name in vain. They mean like don't attach the Lord's name to things that are not of God. And that's how you take the Lord's name in vain, right? And everyone's like, I can say that when people may argue with you. That's just the way it is correctly, but. They didn't do well. What was the number one story? When you read through the Old Testament, it almost gets boring because you're like, oh, we're going to follow God only, and then they follow idols. And then they go, oh, we're so sorry, we're going to follow God. And then they follow idols, and they do this over and over and over and over and over. And again, the question, of course, is why, and there's all sorts of reasons why. But again, they are people, right? They are people. And idolatry continued to be a problem. But here's the thing about Israel, is they didn't just believe in God only, right? They believed Yahweh was the best God, but they did believe in all the other gods of the nations around them. And every now and again, they would go and they would follow those gods for all sorts of different reasons. They would go and follow those gods. Oh, I turned your phone off. It's all right, man. It's going great. What are some of the gods? What are some of the gods of these other places, right? There's Baal. What is Baal the god of? Who remembers? You wouldn't probably know this. Storms, fertility, agriculture. Asherah, you've heard that name. Fertility usually goes along with Baal. Ashtoreth, fertility, sexuality, war. Chemosh, I don't know exactly how you say that. Moabite god of war and protection. And Dagon, you might remember that one, the Philistine. Fertility, grain, fishing. So you have fertility, you have protection, you have agriculture, and you have war. Why those things, right? Because those are the main things of life when you live in this day. Having children was a huge part of having any sort of legacy. Owning land, right, which comes through war, that was a huge part of it too. So fertility, agriculture, war, protection. This is why they keep going to other gods. Why? Because at some point in their life, they're struggling with fertility. They're struggling with their crops. They're struggling with either, losing a battle or getting attacked. And so every now and again, they continued. At some point when they were fearful or they needed control and they really felt like it wasn't going well with God, they would turn back to these other idols. Over and over and over, right? And it's kind of just almost a practical thing, like, well, my crops aren't doing well with Yahweh, I'm going to go with next person, right? This is what they do. And this sounds very human to me, right? It's a sense of control. It's the same reason, like, I do not understand tarot cards and horoscopes, but people legitimately pay money for this because, like, I need to know, I want some modicum of control, right? And they're willing to pay for this. And so it's a very human thing. We continue to do this. We continue to do this over and over and over. And your phone turned off, Tom. You should just yell out your password and out loud. It would be great, right? But it's this hope for control that we have. It's this hope for control. So, thanks, sir. Tom, everybody, Tom. Right? Because in the Old Testament, something about the Old Testament is what? It was very unpredictable. Crops were unpredictable. Other nations were unpredictable. We didn't have doctors and science and all that stuff. And so fertility is still an issue too, right? And so this sense of control. And so it makes sense in an unpredictable time where things are not constant. They continue to fall into idolatry because they want control. They want control. Now, in our day, when an updated version of Mount Sinai, when Jesus now is trying to explain the kingdom and what it means to be a part of the kingdom of God, right? He's up on a mount as well, not Sinai this time, and he gives the Sermon on the Mount, which we read at the beginning of this series, right? Blessed are the, and woe to you, and so, and there's a whole lot more to it. We looked at these things, but right, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who thirst and hunger after righteousness, after justice. All these different things. Peacemakers, justice seekers, the humble in spirit. This is who the kingdom comes through, right? This is who the kingdom comes through. And when Jesus gives this sermon, at no point, right, did Jesus ever fight for political control as he's explaining the kingdom. He kept telling his followers not to fight for control. He goes, we don't need swords, put them down. Like, this is not who we are. Right? This is not what we are. The religious groups used to fight each other because they wanted control, but not Jesus, not his people, not the kingdom people. That's not the way of Jesus, right? And so when Jesus gets rejected, it makes sense because here's a group of people, especially the Jews, living under Rome, living under oppression. And what is the thing that they want? They want to not be under oppression. They want to not be persecuted. And when Jesus comes along with his, when I look into the face of my enemy, see your brother, right? That's not the message they wanted. Enemy love was not the message that they wanted. This ethic of the peacemakers and the merciful, the meek, this is not what they wanted. That's not what they wanted. And so they turned to what? They turned to other gods. Right? They turned to other gods. The gods mostly were politics and violence and war, any way that they could. Any way that they could get a sense of control. And Jesus predicts in Matthew 24, right? He basically says, if you don't choose peace, he says, if you don't choose peace, because there's going to be a terrible time of destruction. Right? I hope it's not in the winter time. I feel really bad for all the pregnant women because the destruction is going to come so quickly and so fast. You're not really going to have time to get away. But in Luke 19, right, he's looking over. I made this image last night, by the way. Chat GPT. It can't put the text in, though. It's still weird. Doesn't matter. Anyways, he's looking over Jerusalem, right? He's looking over Jerusalem. And he said, right, he's weeping over, he said, if only you had known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. Jesus had offered them the kingdom. He said, the way of the kingdom is peace, it's love, it's, all these things. And right? I'll read it for you. How I wish today that you of all people would understand the way to peace, but now it is too late and peace is hidden from your eyes. Before long, your enemies will build ramparts against your walls and encircle you and close you in from every side that will crush you into the ground and your children with you. Your enemies will not leave a single stone in place because you did not recognize when God visited you. Jesus says you can choose the kingdom of God. You can choose peace, or you can choose the way of the world. You can turn to other idols, but it's going to get you killed. And literally it did. And Jerusalem is destroyed, and the temple is torn down. And if you ever read the history of Jerusalem, it's terrible what happened. But the people of Jerusalem, they did not want this way of peace. They wanted control. And what Jesus offered them did not give control. But what's the amazing thing about that is that the early church did choose the way of Jesus. They did choose the way of love. They did choose the way of peace. And what happened, right? Israel Jerusalem, the Jews, they tried to rebel, they tried to overthrow, and they were just absolutely destroyed. But within 300 years, roughly, the way of Jesus actually triumphed, and you have Constantine, and then I kept the guy after him, who really solidified Rome as a Christian nation. And you went from Rome oppressing Christians, but these people who choosing peace, it started to grow and grow, and the early church did such an amazing job of being the kingdom of God, that eventually even the Roman emperor said there's something going on here. And the people were turning to Jesus, and eventually the nation itself. And of course, there's a whole other sermon about how that took everything down the wrong path. But we continue to choose idols of control, these idols of power. And for Jerusalem, it led to destruction. But for the early church, who chose the way of peace, who chose the way of Jesus, it led to actually conquering Rome just in a different way. But we always have this desire for control. Whenever we turn to an idol, it's usually for this sense of control. The good part is today, we don't have to choose right between God and politics. It's not like we go to the voting box and they're like, here's God and here's your politician. That's not how it works. The fact that we can vote is amazing. Again, in everything you read, there is no democracy. There's no chance to go and vote for people. We have that. And so we're not in the same situation as the early church, as the time of Jesus and the time of the Old Testament. We have a sense of control in voting, right? We can control things in that sense, in a way. But we still, even as Christians, even with democracy, even with voting, we still put a lot of our hope. We still put our hope, and we still follow idols, well, all sorts of idols, but especially the idol of politics. And politics is really just the idol of power. It's idol of power. And so why do we do this? Because, again, especially in the last couple elections in the States, right? It always says this, we're fighting for the soul of our country. We're trying to save our country. If the other side gets in, we're dead or we're done and our soul is gone and whatever it is. But it's always, we'll save our country, we'll save our economy, we'll save, fill in the blank, whatever it is you're trying to save. This person, this party, this politician's going to do this, right? And our identity becomes what? Wrapped up in this thing. Right? In the Old Testament, Jesus takes them through the Exodus and he's trying to help them reestablish a new identity. They were slaves once, but you're now free. What does that mean? And for Jesus too, he says your new identity is based here in the Sermon on the Mount. But we continue to go back and we put our hope in something other than Jesus, something other than the cross, something other than the Sermon on the Mount and the teachings in the life of Jesus. Our identity becomes wrapped up with a part. So does our hope and our feeling of belonging, our sense of purpose even, right? Politics gives us all of these things. This is why we're going to go outside with a guitar and just sing for a bit, and where there's no technology anywhere. I'll just talk really loud for a moment until it dies again on me. But it's not green. I like it to be green. But why do people get so upset about politics? Why do they? Because it's not just politics, is it? It's who they are. It's their personality, right? Like someone's posted yesterday, now that Trudeau is not in government anymore, all the people with the F Trudeau flags, what do? Right? What's their new personality? And it was a bit mean, I understand. But I said, yeah, what do you do? If you've wrapped up your life in the last 4 years of this is who I am, now what do you do, right? And this is what we do. We wrap up our identity. We wrap up everything in this thing. I mean, kind of this kind of weird us versus them, right? Now, for people who aren't Christians, I get it. For people who aren't Christians, I understand how it become idol really quick because it's a bit of a tribal identity, right? Like this is my tribe, these are my people. We share the same kind of common. Party doesn't fit in, we're all going to die as a nation, and everything's going to go wrong. And, hey, it's green, that's great. I think the devil works in IT. He seems to know technology pretty well. Right? And again, if you're not a Christian, it makes sense that politics becomes an idol because it's a sense of control. For Christians, we don't have a sense of control, but actually God's in control. But if I don't believe in God, then I'm the only one left in control, and that's a lot of pressure. Right? And so I got to put it on someone else. And so if I can pick a party, then it makes sense. Because again, in Christianity, we have a faith community, we have a shared identity, we have a shared beliefs, we have all these things that draw us together. But if you don't have that, then it makes sense why politics becomes such an idol. And becomes, again, not just something we debate, but like you're attacking my whole personality. You're attacking who I am. Right? And I get it. I understand it. In the same way that you would get upset, right? If someone attacked Christianity and attacked, your church or your whatever, it's kind of the same thing. It's the same idea. It just becomes this us versus them, right? This us versus them. And we're not that different. Even within Christianity, we still struggle with this. Like I grew up, again, I don't know about you, but I grew up with like, if you're a Christian, you vote, I'll tell you, it was conservative, right? Like if you're a Christian, you have to vote Reform. It was Reform Party. Then it was the conservatives. But then I started meeting Christians who were like, actually in our family, because of our faith, we only vote liberal, right? And I was like, what? No. It was taught the other way, right? And then someone else is like, actually because of my faith, I have to vote NDP because of X, Y, and Z. Then other people have been, actually because of my Christianity, because of my belief in Jesus, I actually vote for the Green Party. Or some people are libertarian. They're like, well, as a Christian, I think only God is in control, not people. I'm libertarian. I doubt them a little bit, but not to offend anyone here who's libertarian. But all of a sudden you go, what in the world? All of us are claiming that our faith helps us. This is the only way to vote. Right? That's still an idol. That's still saying, even in the midst of being a Christian, this is the only way that we can be Christians. It's this person. It's this group, right? And it still kind of turns to us versus them. But then we have people like this. We got people like the Amish. Now, some Amish do vote, by the way, but the majority don't. Some Mennonites do vote, the majority don't. They don't believe in the world governments. They don't believe in this stuff. God is God, and that's all we need. And so we do have people like this. They reject rulers, right, because of their faith. They don't just say this is a party, this is God's party. They say God is not in any of these groups. God is not involved in any of these groups. There's no Christian group. And so we're out. We're totally out. And I think some of us, we get that, right? That kind of makes sense. Like, it feels good. You go, yeah, you know what? I don't know who to vote for. I'm going Amish. And so from this week forward, we're going Amish. But then you get this kind of group, which is the other side. So you have the Amish and the Mennonites on one side, and the Hutterites here in Canada too, right? They say, listen, we're not involved in politics. That it has nothing to do with God. Then you have the other side, which is what we call Christian nationalism, which says, no, actually, as Christians, we have to be in government. Not only should we be involved, but actually we should run the government. And not just parts of it, we should run all of it. Even that Canadian guy, right, Joe Boot, he wrote a book, and basically the basis of it says, we as Christians have to take over. It's the only way to save Canada. It's the only way to save Canada. We have to run the education, we have to run economics, we have to run everything. We have to. And he literally says in his book, basically, without saying let's use violence, he says, by any means necessary, Christians have to be in control. And that should worry you. Right? And I like this picture. I don't like this picture, but I like this picture because you know what this is, right? Right? January 6th, insurrection. People have died by this point, right? Police and security guards have already been killed. They're in this place. Everything's illegal, blah, blah, blah. And there's a guy with the Bible. Outside, there's guys with crosses. There's people singing worship songs. And no, trust me, the non-Christian world got it. They saw the violence, and they saw the crosses and the Bibles and the Jesus saves. And it very much hit home for them. And they said, I think we're done with Christianity. And so you got the Amish on one side. You have the Christian nationalists on the other side. I'm not saying either of them are, well, actually, no, the nationalists are wrong. I'm not, But as Amish, I'm not saying they're wrong, but also you're not involved in the world, right? And so you have these two extremes. And for most of us, we kind of fall in between. But for the Christian nationalists, I struggle with the most. And we talk about this a little bit only because they're here now. And they'd be in the news all the time. But what's amazing is, what does Jesus say when he's standing before Pilate? And Pilate's asking all these questions, and he's trying to figure out who he is, and are you a king, and what's going on? And what does Jesus say? What does Jesus say about his kingdom? Right? Probably like one of those famous lines. He goes, listen, my kingdom is not of this world. And I wonder if he smirks when he says it. Right? He's like, if you had any idea who I was, and you're worried about which is my little geopolitical kingdom, right? Like somehow that's going to scare you. He's like, man, if you knew who I was, my kingdom is not of this world. It incorporates the entire universe. That's who I am. My kingdom is not of this world. And so the reason I pick on nationalism, because they said as Christians, we need to make a geopolitical kingdom for God. And Jesus is like, this is not my kingdom. Yes, Christians should be involved in politics. Yes, we should do our best. But this is not our goal. This is not our goal. Let's influence the world, but let's not be, right? What are we called to be? Christians? What are Christians? They are, what does the word Christian mean? It means little Christs. Right? Let's be little Christ to the world. Well, what did Jesus do? Well, we just go to the Sermon on the Mount. Right? What did he do? He gives his life for us. So yes, politics is important. Yes, I think we should be involved, absolutely. But no, we should not be in control. That is not the goal. That is not the point. That is not the purpose. Because again, Jesus gives us our identity, not our politics. And it becomes an idol when we start to shape everything that we are becomes shaped by our politics. What does the Bible call us to, right? 2 Corinthians says, therefore, if anyone is Christ, they are what? They're a new creation, right? The old has passed away. What is the old? I need control. I need power. My identity is shaped by how much money I have, by the house I live in. He says, no, all that's gone. You're now shaped by Christ. Right? I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. The life I now live in the flesh, which I still hear, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. This becomes the core of our identity. Not politics, not I got to save, no. It's the resurrected Christ. My old life is gone. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood. You are a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may what? You may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvel. This is who we are. We are in this world. We're not of this world. But while we are here, what do? We point people to Jesus. This is what we're here to do. And we do that through our politics as well. We do it in all sorts of ways, but politics as well. And again, Paul says, for we are his workmanship. Right? We are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand. That what? That we should walk in them. God created us for these good works, that we go into the world to do good, so that what? People will see him and people will praise him. Even in the Old Testament, Jeremiah, they're sitting in exile, I should say, and everybody's like, what are we doing here? And God sends Jeremiah, he says, listen, he says, build houses, make yourselves at home. This is an enemy territory, right? This is people that they hate. These are people that have taken them from home, murdered a bunch of their family. He says, build houses, make yourselves at home. Put in gardens, eat what grows in that country. Marry, have children, encourage your children to marry and have children so that you'll thrive in the country, not waste away. Make yourselves at home there and work for the country's welfare. He says, work for the country's welfare. Pray for Babylon's well-being. If things go well for Babylon, things will go well for you. He doesn't say pray that things will go well for you, and if they go well for you, then they'll go well for the country you're in. He says, no, pray for them. Work for the place that God, I've put you here. Work for the good of that place. Work for the good of the place. I know you don't want to be there. I know this is not ideal, but I've put you there. And while you are there, you are my people. And while you are my people, you are going to do what brings flourishing. Just out of Genesis, you're going to bring flourishing to the city you are in. Because as that place flourishes, so will you. So will you. So God has placed us here, right? In our city, in this province, in this country, and this part of the world. Not to make good things for us. At no point does he say, listen, you worry about you, just make sure you have a good life. And the rest is trickle down, right? It doesn't work. Trickle down economics does not work. Don't mean to upset you. It starts with the other-centered. And we know that because what did Jesus do? Jesus is like, you come and you give your life for the other. The two greatest commandments is you love God and you love your neighbor. Neither of those is focused on you. First, you love God, and the same way you love your neighbor. This is who we are called to be. So when he puts us here in Cambridge, at the municipal level, at the provincial level, at the federal level, he says, I want you to work for the good of the people around you. I want you to work for the good of the city around you. So when we look at politics and we engage in politics, it's not for our own good. It's not to protect ourselves. It's for the good of the people around us. It's good for our city. And as we do this, and if you go, well, what is good for my city? I don't know. I'm not really sure what would be good. Go back to the scriptures, right? Who does Jesus look out for? Who does the Old Testament prophets continually call Israel to look out for? The poor, the oppressed, the marginalized, the widows, the orphans, the homeless, the hungry, the naked, and the imprisoned. If you ever wonder, how do I do good here? Who do I look out for? Just start there. Okay? Just start there. And so as we think about politics, again, I said something last week. I said there's no evil party in Canada, right? There's no evil party in Canada. And that's true, but that's true for me. That is true for me, all right? There is no evil party for me. I could vote for any party could get in, and honestly, it doesn't super affect me, right? But why is that? Well, one, I'm white, I'm straight, I'm male, I'm Christian. You don't know this? I'm top of the heap, right? I'm top of the heap, right? There's literally no party if they get in that really affects me. But it's not true for everybody. Right? This is not true for everybody. So as we think about, I am here in this city, and I have to think about who is good for the city around me, who is good for the province around me, who is good for, honestly, it's all the same to me. It sounds terrible. I know there's slight differences, but in general, no one is against me. No one is against me. Now, we have the Nationalist Party of Canada. I had to go through the whole website. We have a whole bunch of parties beyond the major 4 or 5. The Nationalist Party, they're a pro-white racist party. They never actually get seats, but they keep trying to get in to be like like education boards, and they try to become the mayor of Toronto like 50 different times. Thankfully, they keep losing. But they're trying to make their way in at any level that they can, right? In any way that they can. Even we have a Christian Heritage Party, if you're going to say there is a Christian party, started by the Catholics, now it's mostly Dutch Reform. Even there's this like weird kind of white supremacy underlying to it. Right? And I'm not picking on the Dutch Reformed Church. Well, a little bit, not too much. I'll tell Norm. Actually, today's Norm's last day, in case you didn't know that. So, Norm, Christian Reform. CRC, Maranatha down the road. Side note, squirrel. Right? But as we think about even our own municipal election, I had to go through all the data I could. All the hate crime, by the way, Waterloo region, Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo, highest hate crime in Canada. Peterborough, number 2. We are number 1. We're number 1, right? For like 2 or 3 years in a row. Nobody out hate crimes us, right? Yeah. Right? The top group is still racial. It's still for the most part, it's the black minority is still the highest group. Second is race related, and so it's Jewish and then Muslim, right? And the third is the LGBTQ, right? And that's the fastest growing. They've tripled in the last, from 2023 to 2024, they've tripled in the amount of hate crime that they see. And so it's still race-based is first, then it's religion-based with Jewish and then Muslim, and third is the LGBT. So again, I said I'm on the top of the heap. None of these parties make a difference to me. None of these parties are against me. But as I vote and as we vote, right, it's not just who protects me and who looks out for me. It's who is good for my municipality, who is good for my province, who is good. And I go, well, I don't know who to vote for. We keep going back to the Sermon on the Mount, which is blessed are what? The peacemakers. Blessed are those who are humble in spirit. Blessed are those who seek righteousness and justice, right? And so as we think, like being the top hate crime city in Canada, right? Not proud of that. I didn't actually realize that till we were going through this. That's terrible. And so as someone who, any party, I need to do my work. And as Christians, we need to do our work and say, well, listen, there was no one out to get me. But is there somebody out there to get somebody else? And we look at these top three, and you can keep going down the list to more, but those are just the top three. And so we have these parties. And again, oh, there it is. Whoops. There's our motivated. So they had the other one, and I think Peterborough was definitely second. I said, man, we lost to Peterborough. That's terrible. Right? Yeah, right? I mean, but so we have these parties. We're going to finish with this. We have different parties. Right? I said to ChatGPT, tell me the good things about each of the Canadian parties. I'm not going to include the Bloc because we don't vote for them. We're in Ontario. If you do, I apologize. I didn't include them. Right? But we have these main parties. And the reason we're going to talk about this really briefly is, again, there is no Christian party. There is no party where just like, oh, that is clearly Jesus and we can just vote for them. Now, every party has good. Every party has bad. There is no party that is anti-Jesus. Maybe if you go down the really small ones, we have the Marxist-Leninists, we have the Communists, we have the Marijuana Party. They don't need it anymore. Rhinoceros Party, they're hilarious if you've ever looked them up. They're ridiculous. I did not know what they were. Has nothing to do with rhinoceroses, by the way. Right? So in general, right, they all have positive things, right? The Liberal Party, they usually advocate, again, this is ChatGPT, supporting diversity, inclusion, social justice, supports climate action through climate pricing, clean energy. Well, they did tell yesterday, at least, right? Conservatives, they focus on, apparently, balanced budgets, lower taxes, reducing government debt, business growth, entrepreneurship, emphasize individual rights, less government intervention in daily life. The NDP, right, stronger labor protections, housing, income equality, universal pharmacare, dental care, and climate stuff too, right? And then the Green Party, hey, Lux, you want to get up and talk a little bit? I see how I've kept you out all the last few weeks, right? But they pride towards like climate change, right? And that's a good thing, renewable resources. This is all coming out of Genesis. This is good stuff. Political transparency, citizen participation, strong healthcare, education, and human rights initiatives. Those are all good things. I asked for the positive things of each party. They each have great positive things. They each have things that you could look at and say, oh, those are all biblical things. Those are all Sermon on the Mount things. Those are all Jesus-y things. That's why politics is not easy. It's not like here's the Christian party, here's the not Christian party. It doesn't work like that. It's not as black and white as that. And the Bloc Québécois, I don't really know what they stand for besides Yay French, which is wonderful. Right? But if you went through the groups, right? And so it's hard, because as Christians, we live at our faith at the personal level, but then when we get called to the ballot box, we still have this role to play as Christians, as believers. And when it comes to it, I say, hold up the party lines, go through, study them all, and then hold it up to the Sermon on the Mount. Hold it up to the teachings of Jesus. Hold it up to the prophets of the Old Testament. Hold it up to the call of good stewardship and taking care of the earth and helping people flourish in Genesis. All of these things, it's all part of it. It's not easy. I wish Jesus was like, just vote for this party and then it's good to go. You're like, sweet. But he's like, you're going to have to use your brain and your wisdom and your heart and everything you know, and you're going to have to do a bit of work. You have to work. Because ultimately, our faith is not in our political parties, right? If it was, we're all hooped, right? Our faith is in Jesus. Our faith is in Christ. Our salvation will not come through the next election. It won't, right? Our doom might come through somebody else's, right? But not our salvation. Just to throw it out there, right? Right? We find hope and security in political parties, sure, but not our ultimate hope, right? Our ultimate hope is in what? It's in Jesus. It's in that one day he is going to come back, and then we know who to vote for. Just kidding. There's no democracy with Jesus. He's just the king, and that's it. But he's the good kind of king. What is the best form of government you can possibly have in the entire world, right? Benevolent dictatorship. It's the best government you can have. And that's Jesus, because he's not like us. He's not like us. Just kidding. But we have the teachings of Jesus. We have this. We have the Bible, we have the history, we have the cross, we have if ever you say, who do I vote for? How do I engage in civil politics? How do I engage in these things? We get to go back to Jesus and say, what would Jesus do? Jesus would give his life to protect other people. Jesus would give his life to save other people. Jesus would give his life, and over every single time when he's eating a meal with the rich and famous who are like, hey, we don't want these people, he goes, these people, those people there, the people I just invited to my dinner party with you and you're all upset about, that's Jesus. That's the person that we follow. The person who continually looks outside the circles of power. Says, is this a circle of power? I'm out. I'm going over there. I'm going to hang out with them. And I'm going to invite them in. I'm going to invite them in. And so as Christians, when we engage in politics, yes, we use wisdom. Yes, we do. But also we just need that heart of God. Right? I like this photo. Right? We vote with love. And not just our human whatever love. We vote with the love of God, where we are willing to lay down our lives, lay down the things that maybe we care about the most if it's for somebody else. Right? Like that's not always easy to do. But when we do that, it allows that thing, that politics, not to become an idol. And that's always the struggle for us, right? Always the struggle for us. Because again, if you don't have someone in your life who's just like livid about politics and like they're just way off the edge, right? If you don't have someone like that, right, you are that person. That's the thing. If you don't have someone in your life, right, that means it's you who's given their whole identity to politics. That's become their idol. But as Christians, number one, no other gods before you. That includes politics. That includes politicians. That includes parties, nation, all of these things. All of these things. Everybody is our brother. Right? Everybody is our brother. Everybody is our sister. How do we do this? How do we lift them up? And so keep reading, right? Keep voting, keep loving. That's how I finish this. Keep reading, keep voting, and keep loving. And again, I don't know when the next election is. I don't know what's going to happen, but every time this comes up, every 4 years or whatever it happens to be when this comes up, just be reminded that we come back to the Word of God. And if you don't know where to go, just go to the Sermon on the Mount and just read through that a bunch of times. And say, this is the kingdom ethics of God. What does that look like as I go to the ballot box and as I live my life especially, but as I go to the ballot box in these ways? And so thank you for entertaining me the last 4 weeks and journeying through with us. So,